So the fat over lean rule, I don't worry about that nearly as much as some people do, because I've had so many years of painting and seeing the effects of how I paint on my paintings. So the fat over lean rule, yes, adding walnut oil is making it more fat. It's the oil that's the fat in there. The pigment is what's added to the oil. So when you take paint out of a tube, different manufacturers will use varying amounts of oil. In fact, the oil is the cheaper part of the paint. So companies who are trying to watch their expenses, they will put more oil in it than other companies. So someone like Vasari paint or Michael Harding, their paints come out amazingly. Their consistency is phenomenal. That's why they're more expensive. And beautiful paints. So you're not going to have the problem of over oiling in their paints. Some companies will have that problem. And I don't want to name any names because I don't know if that was the problem, but I have used some brands where there seemed to be an overabundance of oil and the paint was less expensive. So I try to avoid that, because what happens is, depending on the oil they use, especially linseed oils, they'll tend to yellow over time. And I wish I had thought of this beforehand. I have an old palette that I was using where it was an outdoor palette, and I had a bunch of white paint in there. And after about 2 or 3 years, I took that palette out and thought about using it for something, and saw this glob of white paint there, and it was so yellowed and it just didn't look good at all. And that's when I realized that some paints do not do well over time because of all the oils that are in there and the type of oil, the way it's refined or the amount. So if there's too much oil, especially that's why I use walnut oil, but linseed tends to yellow. And if you get a poorer grade of, David, is something happening again? Hello, David. Thank you. Sounds great. Bye. Okay, so David said we have questions over here in red. Got it. I will get to those next, all you who are live on the webinar. Okay, so with fat over lean. So what happens is there's some things, I'll try to do this quickly. If we use too much oil, the paint as it dries can tend to wrinkle. And if we do, let's say, a real oily mix in the beginning, and then later, and it's drying, and we come back in on top with on this drying paint, and we do a thinner, a less oily paint, then they say that it can tend to crack and have problems because they'll dry at different rates, and the one is fatter and the lean one isn't going to dry the same. What I found with oil paint, that may be so. And the wrinkling part, we do want to be cognizant of, but I paint very thick, and so some caveats here. I don't actually use much oil. Even when I use walnut oil, I don't use very much at all, even in the beginning washes that I do. So other than that, I don't worry about fat over lean at all when I'm painting. I might have some really thick paint and then come back a month later and start painting on it again. And the paint that I put on, I don't know if it's leaner or not, because there are different, like umbers, they're very lean and they'll tend to crack and have problems. I don't use umbers, so I never have to worry about that sort of thing. And the paints that I use, I've never had cracking. I've never had any, and this is over 30 years, well over 30 years. I haven't, as far as I know, I've never had any problems with my paintings that way. Now, when I paint it on canvas, sometimes if something, hits the back of it or something like that, I've had that happen, and thick paint will crack where it gets hit. But even when I was painting on canvas, I didn't have that problem. Some artists have had that problem quite a bit. Zincs, if there's zinc in the paint, that can really cause problems because zinc becomes brittle, and like the Lafranc white that Richard Schmid and Dan Gerhardt's like so much, it has zinc in it. a lot of whites do. I found out that I ordered this M. Graham and Company white, titanium white, and I didn't know it had zinc in it. I looked on their thing, but I didn't see that there. So, but it is on the tube. So I don't actually want to use that white because I want to stay away from zinc entirely, because zinc could possibly have trouble down the line. Now, Dan Gerhardt and Richard Schmidt have both been painting a long time, Richard Schmidt especially, and they've been using the Lafranc white for a long time, as far as they know, at least 20 to 30 years, at least 20 plus years. And I haven't heard anything where there's seeing problems, but the zinc has been shown very clearly to have the possibility for problems. So fat over lean, I don't worry about it too much, and it hasn't affected me. If I'm painting the way that I paint, for the most part, I'm just using paint straight from the tube, and then it doesn't affect me. If somebody's using oils or mediums or things like that on a regular basis, then you might run into problems, but I don't use mediums, so I don't have anything to worry about as far as I've seen.